What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Awesemo Fantasy Football YouTube channel. We are going through a variety of topics this offseason, and today we are going to hone in on 4 pairings of players that are close to each other in ADP. Myself and my good friend Nick Lepri, you can follow him on Twitter at Notorious Fantasy, are going to have a little debate about these players, and we have some highly contested players up at the top of rankings. So I'm excited to get into this. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent today, and I think that this is going to be a very fun video. Like you said, these are going to be players that people might feel very fondly of one player and then not like the other player, or maybe this is going to be very difficult for other people to choose as well in the comment section. So I would also appreciate if when we do all of these, if you guys leave down below in the comment section who you prefer between each of the groupings.
Yeah, for sure. Hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the video, and hit the notification bell as well. That helps us out a ton. So thank you if you've already done that. And we're going to kick things off with a pairing of players at the top of the wide receiver board. And I've honestly, no lie, moved these players back and forth a little bit myself. And for reference, we are going to be using Underdog's ADP when we look at these. So if it's different on your site, just know that Underdog is the place we are using. We're going to kick this off with Stefon Diggs versus Davante Adams. They are wide receivers 4 and 5 in terms of ADP. You have Diggs slightly ahead. His ADP is 8.3. Davante Adams comes off the board at 11.4. I think the big news here is Davante Adams changing teams is going to matter a lot in this debate. He was probably a top 3 receiver with Green Bay just because of that raw target volume he was getting. Not much competition there. But moving over to Vegas, there's at least Renfro and Waller to compete with him. So talk to me a little bit about Adams and then who you prefer in this dichotomy.
Yeah, this is definitely a very close one for me. And like you said, you could just sit here fumbling through these guys every single day, moving one up, moving one down. And in reality, these are 2 guys, in my opinion, that are 2 clear top 5 wide receivers. So, in my opinion, the move for Davante Adams in Las Vegas is going to potentially knock down his target total. But I think at the end of the day, his receiving yards and touchdowns are going to stay very similar to what he had last season. Last year, he had over 1,500 receiving yards, finishing 3rd at wide receiver, and he had 11 total touchdowns, 6th at wide receiver. Now, I understand that Hunter Renfro is very good in the red zone, as is Darren Waller. They also have Josh Jacobs, so it's not like Davante Adams is the only red zone threat on the team. When he was in Green Bay, it seemed like every single time they were just near the red zone, Aaron Rodgers was just going to force feed the ball to Davante Adams. I don't think that's going to be the case in Las Vegas, but at the end of the day, I do think that there's just so many options there in Las Vegas that could even actually help Davante Adams out a decent amount, because you can't just put all of your focus onto Davante Adams like you could in Green Bay. The other options there, wide receiver in Green Bay, were not too good. So I think in Las Vegas, while the targets are likely to go down, I don't expect him to be seeing 10.6 targets per game. I still think he can be just as effective as he was in Green Bay, and I think you could still see him finish inside of the top 3. Between the 2 right now, I personally prefer Davante Adams, but it is very close. Where do you lean in this situation here?
I have these guys ranked 4 and 5, so right at ADP, but I actually have it flipped compared to you. And I view this very close. I think coming out of the first round at the back half with either player, you're going to feel really good. But the reason I like Diggs a little bit more comes down to the offense. They're competing with less options in Buffalo. When you look at the skill position players there in the receiving game, you have Gabe Davis as the wide receiver 2, Jamison Crowder, Dawson Knox. There's just not a lot there. And then you look at the offense overall. Neutral game pass rate, Buffalo was number 2 last year. Plays per game, they were 6. When you compare that to the Las Vegas Raiders, who have a new coaching regime coming in, that with ties to New England, a very run-heavy regime, I do have questions about how much they're going to pass and how quick they're going to be from a tempo perspective. And they could be on par with Buffalo, but these are at least questions I want to raise. And then from there, Diggs has been a fantastic player. No, he hasn't been as efficient as Davante Adams. You look at last year, Diggs was at 1.84 yards per route run. Adams was at 2.81. Adams was 3rd in the NFL. But the 2 prior years, Diggs was at 2.5 and 2.49. So if we see a return towards that 2.5 mark, I think the efficiency should at least be comparable for these players. And then last, it's just Josh Allen versus Derek Carr. So to me, you have more volume and a better offense with a player that's at least on a comparable skill level. So slight preference to Diggs for me. But I'm sure you like Diggs too. But is that kind of what you see happening in Buffalo, or is there a reason you still have Adams ahead of him?
Oh, no, I still think that Stefon Diggs is going to most likely have a really good season, right? Like you said, he is on one of the best teams in the NFL. He's on a team that's better than Las Vegas. He is on a team that, if I'm being honest with you, if they don't win the Super Bowl, Buffalo is going to burn to the ground, most likely, right? They need to win a Super Bowl soon. Stefon Diggs gets the big contract. He is the clear number one guy there. It doesn't really matter even who is around him. I understand they lose Cole Beasley, they lose Emmanuel Sanders, they bring in Jameson Crowder, they have Gabe Davis. It doesn't really matter, right? Stefon Diggs is the clear number one guy on the team. So I understand why you have Stefon Diggs ranked ahead of Davante Adams. I just personally think Davante Adams is a little bit of a better wide receiver. And I think that Las Vegas's offense could be a little bit more pass heavy this season. And that could lead to Davante Adams still potentially putting up a crazy target total.
I agree with you. And ultimately, these guys are back to back in my rankings. So, again, comfortable coming away with either. The next
Mhm.
dichotomy I want to talk about is that the running back position is actually towards the top of the board here as well. But I have a clear preference in this one, and I'm very curious to hear what you have to say. We have DeAndre Swift and Aaron Jones coming off the board back to back. It's RB8 for DeAndre Swift, RB9 for Aaron Jones. That's an ADP of 17 for Swift and an ADP of 18.4 for Jones. I think both of these backs are going to be in a timeshare. One of them's on an elite offense. One of them is on, maybe you could call them emerging, but certainly an offense that's probably below the top 15. To me, it comes down to pass catching. Both these guys have it. So I'm expecting more efficiency to come from Aaron Jones. I'm a little surprised he's RB9 while Swift is at RB8. I straight up would prefer Aaron Jones in my rankings. I have them a little bit further apart. DeAndre Swift is down at RB6, RB15 for me, and Aaron Jones is at RB8. How do you view this dichotomy, and who are you taking if you're on the board in the mid-second round with both these guys there?
Yeah, the funniest thing about this is I think we are the exact opposite, basically. I have DeAndre Swift at running back 7 and Aaron Jones at running back number 13. Now,
Sell
in
me on DeAndre Swift then. I need to be sold.
Yeah, well, the reason why I like DeAndre Swift so much is because I really do believe that this Detroit Lions offense is going to significantly run the ball and run the offense through DeAndre Swift. I think that Jamal Williams, while he is there, he's going to take some things away, right? You can see that coming from a mile away. There's going to be games where Jamal Williams vultures a touchdown. There's going to be games where Jamal Williams maybe has a huge run and that screws over DeAndre Swift. But the same thing you can say about AJ Dillon with Aaron Jones, right? So I'm not too worried about the backup in either situation, in my opinion, with Aaron Jones or with DeAndre Swift. Another reason why I like DeAndre Swift is because I think the team is going to be down in a lot of games. And I think that we could see DeAndre Swift potentially, if he plays 16, 17 games, right? He only plays 13 games last year and he has 78 targets, which is 6 per game, ranking 4th at running back. I really think that if he plays a full slate of games, we could easily see him get over 100 targets. And if that is the case, he could be going over 75 receptions, which would just mean so much in terms of fantasy football. The reason why you draft DeAndre Swift and the reason why you draft Aaron Jones is a little different to me. I think Aaron Jones as a pure running back, a pure rusher, is significantly better than DeAndre Swift, but I think DeAndre Swift's build is a lot better for a pass catching running back. And I think that DeAndre Swift, if he is able to acquire a lot of those targets, wouldn't surprise me at all if he finished inside of the top 5 at the running back position. Again, there's so many names that you can throw in as top 5 running backs, but I think DeAndre Swift is potentially going to be able to finish as that. Again, you don't feel the same, but I think that the best argument for him is the receiving upside is just so high, and that maybe Detroit scores a little more touchdowns this year. Maybe they're slightly better. And then DeAndre Swift's able to find the end zone a little bit more. He only scored 7 total touchdowns last year, which is pretty bad in my opinion. I think that could be higher.
I mean, looking at the players, I think you could say everything you said in the past game for Swift about Aaron Jones as well.
Hmm.
Historically, AJ Dillon's not a pass catcher. He's a big bruising back. He's going to be used a lot on the goal line. But Aaron Jones is a solid receiving workload himself. And last year, you look at games where these two guys were fully healthy and played the full games. DeAndre Swift was at 6 targets per game. So that's awesome. Aaron Jones was at 4.3, which, I mean, you would definitely prefer the 6.
Yeah.
But to the point of positive regression for Jones, no Davante Adams, these targets have to go somewhere. And I do expect Lazard and Christian Watson and Sammy Watkins, whoever it may be, to soak up most of those targets. But I think you could also project a roll forward for Jones. So to me, it comes down
Yeah.
to overall offensive efficiency. And even if Detroit does take a step forward, I'm going to lean on things like the projected win totals, which have Green Bay significantly further ahead of Detroit. So that should just mean more touchdowns overall, which is why I have Jones there. I think overall, he's been a much better running back too, compared to, you look at Aaron Jones, what he's done in his career. He's been much better, like yards after contact and forced missed tackles per attempt compared to Swift. But doesn't mean Swift can't take a step forward. He played a lot of the last year injured. To be honest, he's probably a player I need to slightly bump up my rankings. But for me right now, I have a very clear preference towards Jones. But there's been some pretty good discussion so far. I'm glad we've actually had both sides of these on both. But let's talk about Underdog quickly before we move into our next two. Underdog is the title sponsor of the show. We've been referencing their ADP all throughout the show, and they are the best place to play fantasy football in the summer months. They just unveiled Best Ball Mania 3, which is a massive best ball tournament with $10 million in prizes. All you have to do is draft your team. That's it. There's no waivers, trades, in-season management, none of that. Underdog is just going to give you your best score every week, and then the highest score at the end of the year wins. Last year's Best Ball Mania championship team was drafted in June, so there's literally no time to wait. Better yet, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100 when you use the promo code Awesemo. That's 4 entries into the Best Ball Mania 3, so make sure to check that out. All you have to do is head to underdog.com, check us out in the App Store, or just click on the link in the video description and sign up with the promo code Awesemo today. All right, let's head to our next dichotomy. It's at the running back position, and we are back to the top of the board. We were a little lower there with Jones and Swift, but I think this is going to be one of the hottest discussions all offseason. It's Christian McCaffrey versus Austin Ekeler. McCaffrey's RB2 right now, ADP 3.2. Ekeler is rising rapidly. He's now RB3, ADP 6.5. This guy was like RB7 a month ago. Talk to me about the pairing of McCaffrey versus Ekeler, because Eckler's rise is pretty crazy.
Yeah, Eckler's rise is definitely crazy, but to me, I'm not really surprised at all. He has been my running back 3, 4 for the last couple of months, and I recently moved him ahead of Christian McCaffrey to be my running back number 2. Now, the problem with ranking Christian McCaffrey at number 3 is I know if this guy plays 16, 17 games, he's probably going to finish as the number 1 running back, right? We've seen it. We've seen the crazy workload this guy can get. Now, the question is, will the Carolina Panthers actually give him that crazy workload after seeing what happened the last couple of seasons? If you give him this heavy workload, he's going to get hurt. So the question is, will they roll him out there that heavily, or are they going to retract slightly? But then when you think about it, you know what, even if they retract him slightly, he's still probably going to be a top 3 running back in terms of fantasy football. So these guys are very close in my mind. If Christian McCaffrey is able to stay healthy, though, to be honest, he probably is the clear answer. I am just worried about the fact, again, I'm not a doctor or something. I just feel like based upon what we've seen the last couple of years, the chances that Christian McCaffrey gets hurt and misses at least a couple of games to me is pretty high. And again, not a doctor. There's no medical research behind that. Austin Ekeler last year was running back 2.5 PPR, 3.5 PPR points per game. The reason why you like Austin Ekeler is because of the receiving upside, but he is sneaky at getting a decent amount of carries. He was getting 12.9 carries per game. He rushed for 911 rushing yards, 12th at running back. He was number 1 in targets with 94, number 2 in receptions with 70, number 1 at receiving yards with 647, and number 1 in total touchdowns at the running back position. I do believe that the total touchdowns with 20 was tied with Jonathan Taylor, which it was. But at the end of the day, I think that Austin Eckler's upside is so immense. He is just hinged to an excellent offense, right? If you want to make the offense argument, the Carolina Panthers offense is significantly worse than the Chargers, but that's never really mattered for Christian McCaffrey in the past. So these guys are very close to me. And I could see if you lean Christian McCaffrey, there's definitely reason to believe that that could happen.
I do lean McCaffrey. It's strictly the workload. Now, I do think there are concerns here. This isn't a situation where you have an aging back on a bad team that's just going to get run into the ground. The Carolina Panthers clearly view him as part of their regime. The guy is not a free agent until 2026. And there's a pretty significant amount of dead cap that comes with cutting him. So he's going to be there whether he's healthy or not till he's 30 years old. That's when he becomes a free agent. So to your point, I don't think, if you think Christian McCaffrey is very injury prone, you can't just ride him to these 350 touch seasons, especially after the last 2 years. However, they just don't have anyone behind him or anyone of capability in the offense. I love DJ Moore, but Sam Darnold hasn't shown the capability to get him the ball consistently. Robbie Anderson took a huge step back. You have these very easy targets out of the backfield for McCaffrey. So even if he takes a step back as a rusher, I still think the receiving role is going to remain consistent for him. To your point, it is much closer this year than it has been in previous years, with LA taking steps forward, Carolina taking steps back. But I still think McCaffrey has the better touch projection, which is where I'm going to lean tentatively, but very, very close. Anything else to add on these two?
Yeah, I just think that people are going to continue to kind of shit a little bit on Austin Eckler because he is not necessarily this guy that's going to be seeing a million rushing opportunities a game. They do that on purpose. He's not going to be seeing 15, 16 rushes a game because they don't want him to get hurt. So if he has just 12 carries per game next year, 13 carries, he could still be very effective and could still finish as the number one running back. That's really all I want to say on Austin Eckler, because it seems like people just hate the guy because he doesn't see enough carries, right? Jonathan Taylor's at like 19.5 carries per game. Najee Harris, 18.1. Eckler's never really going to get close to 20, in my
He's
opinion.
200 pounds. You don't want him handling Derrick Henry's workload. He's 200 pounds.
Of course not. But, fantasy Twitter, fantasy people are crazy. They want him touching the ball more. But you don't need that. You don't necessarily need that for him to be very productive.
Man, like he's touching the ball a lot of it coming in the pass game too. So maybe he's not at 25 touches per game, but he's just shy of 20, right around 18, which is really good, especially considering 5.9 targets per game last year. He should be in that ballpark list this year as well. The last dichotomy we're going to talk about today is I think you could honestly do this dichotomy with like 7 players that are even lower in ADP, but for the purposes of this conversation, we're just doing back-to-backs. We're going to do Allen Robinson versus Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis has been a hot name all offseason just because of the additions and subtractions to the offense. It's basically just Diggs ahead of him. Gabe Davis comes off the board at wide receiver 25, an ADP of 51.5. And Allen Robinson, he actually just moved up this morning. He's now coming off the board 48.3. So he's wide receiver 23. But the point with Davis is, and I think you could have this discussion with not just Allen Robinson, but Chris Godwin's going behind him, Rashad Bateman's going behind him, Brandon Cook's going behind him, Darnell Mooney, Michael Thomas. Those are all wide receiver ones in their offense. Gabe Davis certainly isn't that. So basically a bet on Davis at this ADP is a bet on the Bills being, first of all, incredibly efficient again, which I think is a solid bet. But you're also betting that he is the clear wide receiver 2. And we haven't really seen a clear wide receiver 2 in this offense in the Josh Allen era. It has been a combination of players involving last year, like Emmanuel Sanders, Cole Beasley, Dawson Knox. None of them really emerged as that clear option, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah. So I'm trying to bet against Gabe Davis on being the clear number 2. Maybe this will bite me, but right now he is priced at his ceiling, in my opinion. So I guess we could do this a number of ways. We could talk about Robinson specifically, or just this range of players, because I would rather have Godwin, Bateman, Cooks, Mooney, and probably Michael Thomas.
Yeah, now maybe I am slightly different because I like Gabe Davis a decent amount, but I do understand what you're saying, and I think I'm going to have to move him down my rankings because in reality, I think Jamison Crowder could be the number 2 receiver on the team, and I think that where Jamison Crowder is going, he is just a significantly safer pick than Gabe Davis, and there's probably going to be a decent amount of games next season where he is the number 2 guy. The talent of Gabe Davis is what pushes me towards him, though. That game up against Kansas City, you can just see, now that's not going to happen all the time, right? You're not going to catch the ball 8 times and score half the time, score 4 touchdowns, 201 yards, 52.1 fantasy points in that game, right? That is outrageous. I don't expect that to happen again next season, but you can see from that game a path towards potential greatness for Gabe Davis. Allen Robinson, in my opinion, is certainly a safer player. If you're trying to be super safe and you go Allen Robinson, that's fine with me, right? Allen Robinson took a dump last year on your chest if you drafted this guy because he just wasn't the guy in Chicago that he used to be. Now, why was that? I think it might be because Matt Nagy's a little bit of an idiot. He was injured. It is what it is. But I think that this year in 2022 in LA with the Rams as the clear number 2 wide receiver, Allen Robinson could definitely have over 1,000 yards this year. And if Cooper Kupp regresses, which I think he will, it's not going to really even affect Allen Robinson, right? Allen Robinson's still probably going to have a potential monster season. I don't expect him to score in the range of 10 touchdowns. He's only done that once in his career, dating back to 2015 with the Jaguars when he scored 14 touchdowns. But as long as he scores like 7, 8 touchdowns, he could easily finish inside the top 24. So while I do think Gabe Davis is the guy that I would take, I understand why you'd like Allen Robinson because he just seems significantly safer, and you almost know what's going to happen with Allen Robinson. Whereas Gabe Davis, the range of outcomes, it could be really high, right? He could finish inside the top 18, but he also could fall off the edge of the earth, and then Jamison Crowder starts eating, and then he falls outside the top 32.
Yeah, I could also see Robinson finishing in the top 18. Usually you have a couple teams every year that put two top 24 receivers up. The Bengals are probably the one you'd bet on the most. From there, it's probably the Dolphins with Waddle and Tyreek Hill. But from there, I mean, Buffalo's an elite offense. I think you can say the same thing about LA. Maybe not
Yeah.
quite the same caliber, but still a very strong offense overall. You have a bona fide number one in Cup, but Allen Robinson's not even 29 years old yet. He'll be turning 29 right around the start of the year. Last year, he played most of the year injured, which is something that I think, players that are out for games, they don't really get knocked. But you look at Allen Robinson, he sprains his ankle right away in week 5, doesn't miss any games. His efficiency plummets after that. He then strains his hamstring in week 9, misses 3 games, comes back, and he's just flat out not the same player. When you look at every other season he's had outside of the ACL tear, he's been extremely efficient. And now you're pairing him with the best quarterback he's had since high school, which is not an understatement. The guy was playing with Christian Hackenberg in college, the likes of Blake Bortles and whoever the Bears were trotting out there on a weekly basis, including the likes of, like Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky. So I think the passing grade should be a significant upgrade here for Robinson. And what it comes down to, ultimately, the bottom line for me is 2 elite offenses. You have one guy that is the de facto number 2, and you have another guy in Gabe Davis who may or may not be. I think Gabe Davis is the betting favorite, but I don't think it's a lock, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I don't think it's a lock either. I just think that the upside for me is slightly higher with Gabe Davis in Buffalo compared to with Allen Robinson in LA. And maybe that's wrong, right? Because I could definitely see Allen Robinson finishing high. I just think that Gabe Davis is in a position to really boom, whereas I don't think Allen Robinson really has that same upside.
Yeah, if I were picking the better offense, I think it is Buffalo. So if you told me Gabe Davis clear wide receiver 2, that would make sense, and I understand that argument. Ultimately, they're still close in my rankings, but preference towards Robinson. But this was a good discussion, Nick. Any last words? You sold me a little bit on Swift. He's a little too low in my rankings. But anything you want to say to the people before we head out?
Yeah, thank you guys for watching today's video. These discussions are very helpful both for me and Matt on screen here, as well as for you guys. I would assume hopefully this was very helpful for you, and it could help you really mold your opinion on these guys because, like you saw in the video, I don't think we agreed once on a single player, and they're going back to back in the rankings right now on Underdog. So it is very interesting to see, and it could really change our opinions just having a conversation about the players.
Of course, let us know what you think. He is Nick Lepri on Twitter at Notorious Fantasy. I am Matt Gajewski on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. Stick around for the rest of the week. We'll have all kinds of debates like this. We will see you guys again next time.